sense of the court's ruling, files one news anchor and legal expert Stone Grissom and Stone. With the exception of one Supreme Justice, the unanimous ruling of the other justices was, hey, we don't like any more than anyone else what these people had to say here, especially at the setting of a funeral of a loved one. But it is America, and free speech, warts and all, it protects even this. First off, you surprised at all by the decision? I'm
not surprised by the decision. When you read Alito's dissent, though, it's an impassioned dissent. It's exactly what the American people, I'm sure, are thinking. When you look at the facts, we heard the facts right there, they're horrific. But really this comes down to public speech, which is very much protected.
Well, speak to that, because that was the dividing line, whether or not this was a private matter or a public issue. And this, the court, the majority held, was an issue that was in the public discourse. Alito certainly disagreed.
Right. Now, if this had been a private matter, if this had been a grudge match between the church and Matthew Schneider's family, then certainly no protection going on there for what was going on with the egregious behavior. But really what the court was saying and what the majority was saying is that as horrific as the words that were used in the billboards, in the picket signs, and as unrefined as that was, they were bringing up issues of public interest, homosexuals in the military, the Catholic Church, and some of
So they couldn't just say, we hate the Schneider family because they're bad neighbors. They couldn't just do that.
They couldn't walk up and say, Matthew Schneider, was he himself homosexual? And that was Alito's point, is that people walking by, even in the public, you saw the protests, you would assume that they were talking about Matthew Schneider.
It's such a convoluted, obviously horrific argument these people are making, but the father of Mr. Schneider argued that, hey, my family has an elementary right to privacy at this kind of an event, and moreover here, and Alito echoed this, if these people wanted to make public policy debates, there's a time and a place for everything. They had other remedies here, and it was so baseless what they were saying. There has to be a line.
And Alito said that too. Alito took a great exception to the fact that they chose the spot they chose. He said they did that on purpose. The venue. They were 1,000 feet away. They were on public property. They had a right to be where they were at. But his point was they could have gone anywhere. They could have gone to the state capitol. They could have gone to the White House. They could have gone to other venues that wouldn't have put this family in the type of distress that they did. But they chose to do that, so they did that purposely, and that was a private, personal attack on that family. They were trying to inflict harm and get as much publicity as possible.
And he also said there was no contribution, Alito said, to the public debate. Is that a line in the court's eye that somebody has to make a rational conversation to be able to say something hurtful?
Now that's where Alito loses me, because I think it's dangerous when you
Where's
start.
the line, right?
Exactly, and when Alito gets to decide where that line is. Now he's a Chief Justice. I mean, not Chief Justice. He's a Justice on the Supreme Court. But when he makes a personal interpretation that it does not significantly contribute to the public discourse, that's where I think it's a slippery slope.
Now I know in the legal field the expression "bad case makes bad law." Nobody, hopefully, in their right mind can sympathize with what these, honestly, I think maniacal folks from the Westboro Church are doing, let alone saying, and where they're choosing to do it from. But I know in Arizona, something like this came up, same kind of venue, and they said, with a, no, we're going to create an emergency statute that's going to have to keep them away a certain amount of distance. Are there remedies that states, let alone municipalities, can say, listen, you guys can say what you want, but we're going to create, in effect, a shield around these families that you're not going to get within, a mile of them?
Well, and Maryland did that as well. I mean, there are now some states that enact laws that say you can protest, certainly, on public property, but not within a certain amount of distance from a funeral, because certainly those families are vulnerable. They're in a spot where they need their privacy. They deserve their privacy.
Now we're going to bring our audience in a couple minutes here, Stone, to say how they feel and if they were on the Supreme Court, would they have agreed with the major holding of it. But if people say, hey, does this mean basically you can say whatever you want, wherever you want, without fear of ramifications or any kind of, basically punishment for saying something intentionally meant to inflict, baseless, and without regard for whoever and however you do it? What's the answer?
Well, the answer is no. You can't just say whatever you want to, whenever you want to.
Can't cry fire in a crowded theater.
No, fighting words are certainly not protected. Defamation is not protected. I mean, those are carved out pieces from the First Amendment. But when it comes to public debate, our founding fathers' political speech, that's the purpose, that's the basis of free government. And it has to be so protected. I have to be allowed to argue politically or public speech in terms that will so inflame you that you would stand at the top of a mountain and scream back at me for the rest of your life. I mean, that's the type of protection that type of speech deserves. And this is a perfect example. People aren't going to like this. I don't like the fact that they're allowed to do this. There isn't a lawyer in the country that likes the fact that they're allowed to do this. But you have to celebrate the idea that our country is so important, that our democracy is so important, that even this hateful type of behavior is tolerated in this country. And it's a tough decision. I don't think any of those justices enjoyed ruling the way they did. And I would invite all of your callers at least to look at it through that lens. It's a tough thing, but that's why the Constitution is so great, because when it's tough, that's a document that really stands for something.
All right. Well, you heard Stone's closing argument, everybody. Now we're going to bring you into our conversation.